In this exercise, I'm going to build a crazy contour coil vase. We're going to use the coil technique to create a vase sculpture that is a unique and freestanding piece of art. We're also going to use those coils to emphasize the surface and contours of the artwork. Please keep in mind that, as with many of my videos, I will speed things up and slow things down as I wish to emphasize different steps. So if it appears that I'm moving faster than normal, I am. Now let's focus in on the activity. I've rolled out a small slab here from a small piece of clay to act as the base of my vase. Since part of my criteria is a minimum of 4 inches across, I'm going to use the lid from this soup can that is 4 inches across to mark the clay in a circle. While many coil projects might start with a coil or a spiral coil as a base, this one is easy to keep flat if I just use a slab. You can see that I marked the slab with the lid, but I'm actually using a clay knife to cut it out. I'm doing that because the lid had a solid side and I did not wish the clay to get stuck inside. I could have almost as easily freehanded a base, but I wanted to show that there are simple solutions to those who might lack the confidence to do so. I clean up the base not only with the knife, but now I'm rolling it to get the sides smooth. A little bit of moisture helps sometimes too, but this clay is pretty wet, so I don't need a whole lot of that. And here I'm going to double check my measurements. They look fine. And so I'm going to start building my first coil by taking some of the clay scraps together along with some clay from the lump, putting them together and rolling them together in my hands to produce something that's oblong. Now I'm going to roll it back and forth. You can see here that I moved from the board to the non-porous table. I usually prefer the table in this case because it does not leach as much moisture out of the clay. The smooth surface can also produce a smoother coil. I'm going to constantly use my fingers to feel for the thicker and thinner parts. I'm also going to use my eyes. I can always gently roll the thicker parts thinner, but I can never roll the thinner parts any thicker. That may sound obvious, but my point is if I split my concentration, I can easily mess this up. Once a coil is destroyed, you have to start over again. Now I'm going to measure the size of the coil against my finger. This is a good way in any given project. If you want your coils to be about the same size, use the same finger for measurement. Now my first coil is going to attach directly to my base. I'm going to measure it out here a little bit, and then I'm going to score all the way around the bottom of the base just to make sure that I've got good score marks there, and I'm going to score along the edge of the coil. You will also see that I use a brush to put slip all around the base and the edge where the score marks are and on the coil where the score marks are, so that when I push the two together, the slip will squish out. Clay structures are always strongest when made from a single piece of clay. The very concept of hand building means that I'm going to use these coils each as a separate piece. Since they are not part of the same piece of clay but separate pieces, they must be scored and slipped together. If you do nothing, the pieces will fall apart. If you only score and do not slip, the pieces will fall apart. If you only slip and do not score, the pieces will fall apart. The idea of scoring and slipping is to try to make it all back into one piece of clay. It's not perfect, but it is the best option and the only option that works on any regular basis. This clay that I'm using is relatively new and it's soft and malleable. That means that it's relatively easy to form, but it will sag under gravity because it's not as strong as older clay might be. Older and a little bit drier clay forms a stronger structure, but is very difficult to make into coils and is not as easy to form and mold. The amount of moisture in your clay is a choice, and this choice offers a trade-off between stronger structure and easier molding. You can choose either way. What you do not wish to choose is to use new clay with old clay. Clay has water in it which must dry, and when it dries it shrinks. Because it is wetter, new clay will shrink more than old clay. With different shrinkage rates, any bond made by scoring and slipping between two different hardnesses of clay will most likely crack when one shrinks more than the other. If you put your project up overnight or for a day or more, you may wish to use your fingers to feel how much moisture is in the clay before selecting another clay to use with it. Now, while I've been telling you about different hardnesses of clay, you may have noticed that I have been sealing up the inside of this by using tools. I've been using sticks, and I'm using a rib, and I'm using my fingers to fill up any holes that I can from the inside and blend the clay together. When building with the coil method, we build from the bottom up, stacking coils on top of each other. And so every couple of coils, I want to seal up the inside because I want this vase to be watertight. In building, there normally comes a time when the bottom coils cannot be reached on the inside. If I spend the time early on while I can reach the inside, then I don't have to worry about it later. You may also notice that I use a paintbrush to push slip into all of the cracks that I possibly can. Many like to smooth their ceramic work out with a damp sponge. I prefer a brush. Now you can see that I'm starting to build more coils. Let's see what I can do with them. I think for the next couple of layers I'm going to have some of the coils weave in and out. So I'm going to make a coil here, maybe another one later, and I'm going to make some little balls about the size of my knuckles, just over and over again, that I'm going to weave in and out of some of those coils. I could just make them as I need them, but I think I'm going to need 8 right off, so if I make them to begin with, I won't have to make them later. They may look easy to make, and actually they are. I don't even need the table, I just roll them in my hands. Next, I'm going to start attaching them to the coils that are on the base. Notice that once I size up where I wish to put one of the balls, I score and I slip it in place. I'm going to score and slip each one of the balls on this layer in place. If I do not score and slip, it will not stay together. Now this clay is pretty soft, so even when scored and slipped, it will still be a bit wobbly. At this point, it's best if it bends a little bit under my efforts. I can always bend it back. Clay that does not bend will instead crack and break, which can be catastrophic. Please note that I'm pre-scoring each of the areas where I feel that the coil that I'm going to put on is going to come into contact with the other parts of this piece. As I go along, I score the coil wherever that contact is made so that I have scoring on both sides, both the base and the coil that I'm putting on, and I slip both sides as well before I put them in contact with each other for the final time. Please note that this pattern is leaving a lot of holes in the side that I'm going to have to plug if I want this to be watertight. If parts fall or break off at this point, check your scoring on both sides and re-slip. Make sure that it's got a good tight bond. The more scored and slipped points of contact that there are, the stronger the structure will be. I'm going to go ahead and speed this way up for a minute or so just to get through this section. Okay, so I made 8 balls and I put coils above and below them, weaving up and down. I used soft clay and slip to plug all of the holes next to the ball shapes from the inside of the vase. I used ribs and wooden tools and my fingers to smooth out the inside of the vase as well. I'm now going to make coils of a different sort. Once again, I start with the same base coil, but this time I'm going to spiral them. A spiral just means that I'm going to roll them up, but it's not enough just to roll it up. I'm going to need to score and slip along the inside and the outside to make sure that the coil stays all together and eventually is watertight. Note I scored along one side of the coil, and now as I roll it, I score a little bit more each time as I roll it. Once I roll a coil of approximately the right size, if I have more left over, I just chop it off. I'm going to want spiral coils to build with of approximately the same size. I put some extra slip on the outside to smooth it out, and I check the size. And it looks like I need about 5, 6, maybe 7 of them to go all the way around. So here it looks like I have enough coils to go all the way around. Once again, I'm going to score and slip them in place. I'm going to score all the way around, and then I'm going to score the bottom of each of them. And where each of them touches the one next to it, I'm going to also score it to make sure that I get a score and slip between every piece as I put it on here. Now I have the spiral coils in place and all scored and slipped together, and I put another coil on top to hold the tops of them together even stronger. I've plugged the holes with wet clay and slip, and I've smoothed out the inside, and I'm going to continue smoothing this for a while here just to make sure that everything is nice and neat. Once I have it just about the way I think I'm going to want it, I'm going to check the height. My criteria for this was at least 4 inches wide and at least 5 inches tall. Looks like I've hit over 5 inches. It's about 5.5, so that will do for now. Now it will need to dry out and be bisque fired. Once bisque fired, I will then glaze it. While many glazes do not get along with each other, I specifically mixed up these 5x20 glazes to get along with each other and work as a unit. And this is what it looks like after it has been glaze fired. I wanted to use the dripping surface of the glaze to accentuate the coils, which in turn accentuate the contours of the vase. Let's check the criteria. The vase is balanced, it's freestanding, stands on its own. It has 4 or more shapes of coils. I like to think it's a creative design. I checked it. It's a minimum of 5 inches tall, 4 inches wide, and I did make it watertight. A couple of afternotes. First of all, this is what it looks like when scoring and slipping is not properly done. It's obvious that none of these pieces were scored, and without the scoring, it doesn't matter if they slipped it. The next note is that coils are a building technique. Here are 2 pieces that do not show the coils. They've been smoothed out. The coils, however, allow them to be built from the bottom up and be made watertight inside to places that can no longer be reached. However, coils themselves can be treated as a sculptural form. When used this way, they accentuate the natural contours of the art, and they allow the artist one more powerful visual tool. When smoothed inside but not outside, they allow for structures to become watertight, like vases, and to show the contours on the outside as a sculpture.